Welcome to Rome. This is The Bittersweet Life with Katie Sewell and Tiffany Parks. Hello, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katie Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Tiffany is in Rome. Katie is in Seattle. And Tiffany, you have something to share with us today.
Well, I'm reading The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway right now. I was having a hard time getting into it, and now I'm thoroughly into it, and I'm liking it. But I'm not a huge Hemingway fan. Let me just put that out there. I much prefer Steinbeck and Fitzgerald 100 times more. But, you know, I do appreciate Hemingway. I try to anyways.
Okay.
But there's this famous Hemingway quote. If you're an expat, you've heard it. You've heard it somewhere, you know? I was very familiar with this quote, but I didn't know where it came from. And I was not on the brink of giving up this book because, you know, I almost never give up books. But I was that's how I was feeling. I was kind of like, God, this is tedious.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to this scene in which the narrator, who is an American writer, well, he's like a newspaper guy who is living in Paris, is talking with another writer, but a novelist who is visiting from the States, who does not live there. And he says, well, first he starts out, he keeps saying, you're an expatriate. He keeps bringing it up. He just keeps saying, you're an expatriate. Why don't you live in New York? Then you'd know these things. Mm-hmm. This really reminded me of the last conversation we had, the cultural fluency episode, because, you know, you're saying if you lived in the States, you'd know that Americans drink fizzy water now. Fizzy water, not frizzy water.
Call it what you will. Yes.
You know that we don't say supplement when we're talking about extra charges in the taxi cab. So he says, you claim you want to be a writer, but you're only a newspaper man. You're an expatriated newspaper man. And then he jumps ahead and says the line that I said, you're an expatriate. Why don't you live in New York? Then you'd know these things. What do you want me to do? Come over here and tell you every year? And finally he says, this is the line that really would keep me up at night. He says, you're an expatriate, one of the worst type. Haven't you heard that? Nobody that ever left their own country ever wrote anything worth printing, not even in the newspapers. It's not the famous line. I'm getting to the famous line.
Yeah,
but that was like...
Also not true for him. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, yes, truly, not true in this case. But this is his first book, right? So I don't know that Hemingway had been an expatriate at this point. He'd been in the war, but that's not the same thing. This line, you're an expatriate, he keeps saying it. I'm like, I've heard that. You know, I've heard that line somewhere before. Finally, he gets to the little mini speech that is so famous. You're an expatriate. You've lost touch with the soil. You get precious. Fake European standards have ruined you. You drink yourself to death. You become obsessed by sex. You spend all your time talking, not working. You're an expatriate, see? You hang around cafes.
Sounds lovely.
Have you ever heard that line?
I'm sure people use that in the way that, doesn't that sound lovely? Yeah.
Well, I think that they do. They do. And that's the funny thing. In the book, it's so negative. It's this like, you're a dissolute, loser, basically. But people who sort of romanticize the expat life put this in quotes. And I think I've used this quote before on our social media or on my own. And I finally got to see it in context, which I was happy about.
So when you knew it out of context, did you think that it was a positive?
I mean, it's very positive, negative. I mean, clearly, you drink yourself to death, not a positive.
Not a positive, yeah. That's a giveaway.
Becoming obsessed with sex. I mean, that's a little more interesting,
yeah.
I suppose.
Yeah.
Hanging around in cafes is good.
Yeah.
But who would want someone to say of them, you spend all your time talking, not working? I mean,
I think that is what people go traveling to do in the hopes of, in some cases, maybe. I mean, I think sometimes you travel for work or travel to inspire future work, but sometimes you travel or displace yourself just because you want to stop working so much and do more chatting in cafes, more living, so to speak. I had not heard that before, but to be honest, which is kind of funny, even though a lot of people consider this an expat show, which I do not, but okay, I'll go with it. I don't spend a lot of time reading about or thinking about expats. Like, I'm not searching out quotes about the expat experience in my day-to-day life. I'm looking for the inspiration for this show, but I naturally now think about the themes of this show.
Yeah, but it did. I mean, you have to admit it did start. That was our original, the original very first seed of this show was the looking at the expat life from a long-term perspective and a short-term perspective.
Oh, for sure.
Um,
And I think it's a big, I still
and
think it's a big part of it. And obviously, I
mm,
interview a lot of people who are reporting on different aspects of the expat experience. But yeah, I don't know. I think I mean, it makes sense to me that you would be encountering more quotes about the expat experience than I would
I'm
be.
trying to think about when I first heard this quote, and it might have been I was part of a very extremely low budget, what I think began as a student film, but eventually turned into like a passion project for a guy that I knew living here in Rome, my first year in Rome, an English guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he made this short. It wasn't a short, it was not feature length, but it was somewhere in between. Just basically all of his friends in the cast. There was not a single paid actor in it. His best friend was a cameraman. He wrote it and directed it. The people that we knew in our neighborhoods, let us use their cafes and stuff like that. And it was called La
Mm-hmm.
Bella Figura. And there's a scene in it in which he has just arrived in Rome from London, and he is taking an escalator up in the metro. And I think that this quote, or perhaps part of it, is sort of on voiceover.
Mm-hmm.
That may be the first place that I heard it. And
Mm-hmm.
then later I encountered it and knew that it was Hemingway, found it somewhere. So
Yeah.
that may be where.
I mean,
But
it does have that feeling of a quote that would sort of be that sort of ironic start to a movie of some
yeah,
kind of movie or the experience. You know, when you were reading it, it reminded me. Have you ever seen the movie Train Spotting?
I have, but it's been so long. I couldn't tell you a thing about it except Ewan McGregor's in it, right?
Yes, that's correct. It's also about heroin, you might remember. But there is this line in there. Can I read it to you? It's a little bit long.
Sure.
It's more of a paragraph. It's like a speech, but it has sort of the same ring to it where it's like both attractive and also trying to make a point, in the negative. So here's what it is. Choose life. Choose a job. Choose a career. Choose a family. Choose a big television. Choose washing machines, cars, compact disc players, and electrical tin openers. Choose good health, low cholesterol, and dental insurance. Choose fixed interest mortgage repayments. Choose a starter home. Choose your friends. Choose leisure wear and matching luggage. Oh, by the way, I'm cutting out the profanities in this for those of you who are purists. But okay. Choose DIY and wondering who you are on a Sunday morning. Choose sitting on that couch watching mind numbing, spirit crushing game shows, stuffing junk food into your mouth. Choose rotting away at the end of it all. Choose your future. Choose life. But why would I want to do a thing like that? I choose not to choose life. I choose something else. And the reasons? There are no reasons. Who needs reasons when you have heroin?
Ugh.
And you see how it's like, here's all these aspirational things, and then it starts to turn the aspirational things upside down. And all along they're
Mhm.
making fun of people who live a normal life. At the same point, here they are like saying the ultimate message, which is, how can I make any choices about any of these things when I have heroin? You see how it kind of reminds you of the same thing? It's like,
Yeah, it is because it sounds like a good thing at first, and
choose
then it
these things. You
becomes
want to
a,
do this. You want to have that. Into no choice at the
yeah.
end. Good movie.
Mm.
Dark. Dark.
Yeah, it would have to be.
Yeah, but so you were thinking like in part of reading that though, when you read that line about the expat experience, that what did it remind you of in your own life?
I mean, you've lost touch with the soil. I think that's the big line. That's the most important line in it. You've lost touch with the soil. And that goes back to the line before it when he says, "You're an expatriate. Why don't you live in New York? Then you'd know these things." And as a writer, do you have to live in your own country for most of your life to be able to write about your compatriots with any kind of accuracy and insight and understanding?
Hmm.
Luckily right now I'm writing historical fiction. I kind of have a
Set in
pass, a little
Italy.
bit of a pass,
Yeah.
set in Italy. But if I wanted to write a book, a contemporary work of adult fiction set in the United States in 2023, how would I be able to do that in an authentic way? Because I haven't lived there in so long.
So you think that if you set a novel in, say, New York City, 2023, that you would be walking into landmines of things that don't ring true to people in New York.
Very likely. I
Hmm.
think anywhere in the United States. I mean, there is a certain amount of pop culture that you just come across, but I don't consume probably enough pop culture to be getting, an accurate read from just that. And I don't spend enough time there. I spend every so often, I go to the States, but I'm on vacation mode. I'm not on the streets interviewing people or sitting in cafes listening to people's conversations. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I don't know. I mean, I see what you're saying, but I also think, I mean, you're writing a historical novel. It's like, yes, there's nobody
Yeah, well,
around from like the 1500s that's going to be like, excuse me, I'm sorry, actually. We didn't have any kind of crackers that were like that. But
I'm sure there are historians who know that
I
though.
know, I'm sure, but like,
But
but
yes, no, I'm saying, when it comes to historical fiction, it's not a problem. It's not a problem for me. I'm lucky. But if I were a newspaper writer or someone who was trying to write the great American novel like Hemingway did, or, could argue that Hemingway has done, how do you write that great American novel if you're living in Paris or Cuba or wherever you happen to be living?
I mean, I think people do it all the time. I mean, maybe you would write the great American novel and set it in the 90s. Like you were
Yeah.
living in America in the 90s, and you could write that from Rome. I mean, when I was doing research for the writer Anthony Doerr, one of the things he said to me is it doesn't have to be how it would go in real life, it just has to seem plausible to the reader.
Right.
I gave him all this data about the ins and outs of the Idaho justice system. It's not like he was now going to map that all out for the reader to make sure that they knew the ins and outs and how exactly it would go. It's more like I need to know so that I can figure out what would be plausible for my people to do and not completely
Yes.
outlandish. And I think that you probably could do enough research into New York City or wherever you're setting it, or hell, set it in Seattle. Then at least you have some context for having been there. I think it's harder when you've never been in a spot and you have to set it there.
True, true. Well, I honestly don't think that I will ever do that. I mean, I never say never, but not famously, I have repeatedly said that everything I've ever written was inspired by Rome.
Mm-hmm.
Or, Italy, maybe Italy more broadly, but, pretty much Rome. All my inspiration comes from Rome for whatever I write. And so it's unlikely that I'm going to be like, oh, I'm going to set my next book in like South Dakota in 1952. It's just probably not going to
Well,
happen.
here's the reverse question. Let's say hypothetically that you do end up saying, you know what, my time in Italy is done. I'm moving back to the United States. Do you feel like you could still plausibly write about Rome?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Well, here's another question. Do you think you could plausibly write about Rome? Let's say you moved today, okay? And you
Hmm.
want to write a book that's set in Rome in 2024. Do you think you could plausibly write a book that's set in Rome in contemporary times?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Why not? Why, I mean, why not? My first book was set in contemporary times in Rome. I mean, I was living here, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to be gone for a matter of months. I haven't lived in the States for 19 years this month. 19
Yeah,
years.
I know. It's exciting. But I mean, it also takes a while to figure out like what's going on. Like I lived in San Francisco for more than 2 years. Does that mean I could write a plausible San Francisco novel? I guess.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't know that
I mean, this is
for
the
me, it's
thing.
not,
Only people in San
it's not,
Francisco know if I'm right or not, right?
yeah. Yeah. I mean, you'd have someone check it who lived there, like I did for Liam Callanan for his last book. He had me read through it and make sure, like, is the street actually like this? And it was, pretty basic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That, you can get a fact check person, a person who checks the authenticity of your book. But it's more than that. It's more, and it's not so place specific. I mean, place American, but not like city. Like I just feel like, do I know what the American, like what the
Experience.
experience is anymore? Do I mean, you can imagine the challenge. I mean,
Yes.
it's one thing to write a book that takes place in another country but is about people from your country.
Mm-hmm.
Like Liam's book When in Rome, it's about Americans living in Rome. it's another thing to, it's extremely ambitious to say, okay, I'm going to write a book. Even if you've lived there for a couple of years, I'm going to write a book about Germans living in Germany today. How would I know how would I ever be able to capture that authentically?
Mm-hmm.
People do it. People have done it, but I think it's a huge undertaking.
Sure. Okay. So let's see. Do I think that you understand what it means to be an American right now? Hmm. I would, you know me, I'd be more in the middle. That I would give you some sort of a wishy-washy answer. But I guess I would say no, you don't. Because it is quite different to be an American today than it would have been when you last lived here in 19 years ago. But that said, I mean, we've already established well in this show that some of the cultural DNA is so baked into you. This is where it gets wishy-washy, is because your work ethic comes from being an American. It does not come from you spending almost 20 years in Italy. No question
True.
about it. So I do think that there are cultural, our ways of being are in you in many
Mm-hmm.
ways. But I mean, you don't understand it from the stress level or the ins and outs of like day to day life anymore. I don't think you get that. And you've never really had to navigate like the simple things like, it's not simple, it's so complicated. Things like the American medical system. You left so
Well,
long ago.
I lived in America until I was 27.
Okay, but
So some stuff,
like,
yes.
but I mean, as stuff starts to break down, as you get older and,
Mm-hmm.
in your 20s, how often do you go to a doctor's office? I mean, like next to never when you have to, when they tell you you must go, or maybe you break a bone or something, otherwise you don't even darken those doors, you just are out in the world ignoring it. So there are things like that you've never had to deal with. And if you stay there, you'll never have to deal with. But I mean, it's too harsh. That's what I mean. It's too harsh for me to say, no, you don't understand it, because obviously you do understand it. But
Well, I mean, like you said, it's a gray area. It's not all or nothing.
mm-mm.
But there are certain aspects of daily life that I wouldn't get. Um, a lot of people who live in Italy, though, like even people who live, I'm talking expats here, even people who live here long term, a lot of times don't understand what it's like to be an Italian.
Yeah, I could see that.
Even people who become citizens,
Yeah.
there is a superficial way to live as an expat. It's very, especially if you have a certain amount of money, it's very easy to sort of skate on the superficiality of Italy
Yep.
and never and not understand. You just see the good stuff. And there's a lot of good stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
just see the sunshine and the good food and the long vacation, summer vacations
Yeah.
and whatever,
Yep.
and never see the kind of, and even I do not go as deep, as my husband, and I see through his eyes, so many of the really difficult and really challenging things about the school system. I'm learning now, but my kid's still only in third grade, so I haven't lived through the bad part. But there's a lot of stuff that I don't experience, and that a lot of expats don't experience living over here.
Right. Well, I mean, because it's an adopted country, so you can really choose how far you want to go.
The problem is you get to the point where it's like, do I? Is there anywhere that I understand and that I know truly?
Well, here's what
If
I
I
do
don't know my
think.
home country anymore, and I don't know the country I'm living because it's an adopted country, where is there a place in the world that I truly know?
I think here's what I would guess, because you have this very strong foundation of growing up in the United States and living here until you were 27 years old. I feel like your capacity to adapt back into it would be much faster than your ability to adapt to living in Italy would be, or was, or has been.
Possibly,
I think
possibly.
definitely, because it's, I mean, 27 years is a long time, and it's also the origin story. That's the stuff that's
Mm-hmm.
getting baked in when you're just a little person. Things that are normal when you're a little person, whether or not they seem normal now or not, are still in there somewhere as like what it was like. And so I do feel like if you came back, you might be able to figure it out faster than a new person who was arriving certainly. Whether or not everything had changed, you'd figure it out faster. Because you still are raised in like the central tenets of what it is to be an American. You whatever the cultural glue that we all have that bind us together as a personality type. It's not even a personality type, but whatever that is, the way that we culturally are as Americans, that is who you are from birth. Now, it's interesting for Aurelio because, I mean, I guess he'll think of himself as origin story Italian, but he's also
Yeah, for sure. He feels American, but it's definitely secondary.
yeah.
It's funny. I when we were in Austria, we bunch of the kids who were staying in our hotel and their parents were playing a game of I wasn't playing. Claudia was playing with Aurelio. They were playing soccer, right? There was a sort of outdoor soccer field at this hotel. It was the dads against the kids. And I took a little video of it and I put it on my Instagram and I put the little flags of all the countries that were represented. And I put, Scotland was there and Germany was there and Italy for Claudio. And then I put the American flag because I wanted to have as many flags on there as possible. And I really looked at it and he goes, "Who is American?" And I was like, "You, you were American." I was like, "Oh, right."
Yeah, but I mean, maybe that's like an abstract for him, really. I know he's been to America a few times, but, in the grand scheme of life, given that he's not that old,
Yeah,
he's still a child.
I mean, I think he tends to feel more American than the typical expat kid. Not expat. He's not an expat. He's a bicultural kid because I am, like it's the 4th of July, let's celebrate American independence, or it's Thanksgiving, or it's Halloween, like trying to get those American important cultural moments in and he's got little like a map of the United States on his wall and I'll buy him shirts with like American flags on them if I see them or USA because I want him to feel that identity. And it's kind of a superficial way of feeling it, but it's what I can do beyond traveling there when we can. So I do think that compared to a lot of the kids I know who are in the same situation, I feel like he is a little bit more, at least how he says it, when he talks about himself, it comes out a little bit more. But still, that moment, he was like, "Who is the American?"
Well, I'm curious actually because maybe he doesn't like think about his like social reputation and stuff a lot yet. But I don't remember in 3rd grade whether or not I cared about that. But I wonder, is there some sort of social cachet by him being able to say that he's American?
I think there is. Yeah, I don't know that he's aware of it yet. I do know that like a lot of times it's not so much the kids, but like the moms will say it, but he will hear it. They'll be like, "Oh, you're so lucky. He can speak English fluently. Oh my gosh, that's so great. What a great opportunity. He's bilingual. That's so wonderful." Or they'll say things like, "Oh, can you help my son, with his English?" He was over at a friend's house the other night, his best friend's house, and his friend's mom was like, "I'll give you €1 if you give me an English lesson," or €5, I think. She said, "I'll give you €5 if you give me an English lesson."
Wow.
So he does have a certain amount of perception of it. And then, of course, when he's in the States, my mom, like if he meets one of my mom's friends, she'll be like, "Oh, my grandson speaks Italian. Say something in Italian," which he, of course, refuses to do. You don't want to do that. That's embarrassing. So anyway,
Yeah.
I think he maybe gets it, but, a little bit.
I mean, I'm sure, knowing how much he likes to please you, that if you give him like a positive reaction every time he's like, "I'm an American," that he would say it all the more, because if he gets a nice hug and a snuggle every time he's like, "I'm an American boy," then he's going to be like super American pride,
He has said it when he says it, it's usually because he's like, because I've gotten so into the Italian way of serving meals one thing at a time. Like I give him his pasta, and then when he's finished with that, I give him fish or meat or whatever it is. Italians do usually eat a vegetable along with the meat, but I'll give it to him separately after. That's much more Italian. I mean, I don't think Americans do that really, unless it's like a restaurant and you get an appetizer, right?
Well, yeah, we always eat things at the same time, but that's very funny because we've talked on the show so many times about you complaining about how long he takes to eat, but that's, because he won't keep moving forward eating. But man, if you're serving him 3 courses every day, geez, that's
but I mean, it's the same amount of food.
But it's coming in courses. Like we're just piling it all together and,
Yeah. Well, sometimes he'll say, "Can I have some turkey?" he loves turkey. There's American right there. He'll say, "Can I have some turkey with my while I'm eating my pasta?" And I'll be like, "No, you can't have turkey while you're eating pasta." Like, it's just I truly, there's nothing wrong with it. I should just be like, of course, eat, the more you eat, the better.
Yeah.
But of course, my instinct is to be like, "No, you can't have turkey," because I know he'll just eat the turkey. He won't eat the pasta. And he'll go, "Mom, I'm an American boy."
See?
Boy.
Isn't that
And
interesting
then
that he knows that's an American thing?
He knows. And the other thing, the other thing he said to me once was like, he's like, "Mom, can I have some milk while I'm having dinner?" I'm like, "No, you can't have milk with your dinner." And he's like, "Oh, American boy." I'm like, "Okay, have some milk."
Look at you. See, there you go. As far as whether you've gone native or not.
That's when I really feel like I've gone native.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "No, you can't have milk with dinner. That's the most disgusting thing I've ever heard of."
What are you talking about mixing your meat?
I grew up having milk with dinner every night.
I know. Yeah. And now it's not only unacceptable, it's absolutely repulsive. And how dare you ask? And he's like, "It's good for my bones." Yeah. All right. Well, we should leave it there. Super fun, though, to think about. And maybe tomorrow you'll just let Aurelio have that milk with his food. Let's try it as an experiment. Like set it down with the pasta and just see what he does. See if he reacts like in the opposite, like with offense.
The milk or another food?
No, like set the milk down with the first course. Maybe put the pasta with the turkey. And give him the glass of milk and see what
I need
to
get one of those plates they have in America that are like divided.
You don't have to do plates. You don't have to do that. That's like at a school lunchroom.
Because kids can't stand when foods are touching. It's like a universal kid thing. That is not based on country. That is like universal. Kids don't like their food to touch.
Yes, that's fair. But you can like just put the pasta, wedged up against one side and the turkey on the other side. There's nothing crazy like peas that could roll across in that circumstance. So yeah, maybe just like set up the meal totally differently and see what he does. We could do it as a social experiment.
I could try that.
All right.
I'm game.
All right. Well, thank you very much for supporting this show, those of you who do. Remember, there's always bonus episodes over on Patreon. Patreon.com/The Bittersweet Life Podcast for as little as $5 a month, extra time, and lots of conversations that are absolutely fascinating, but will never end up on this main show. And we'll leave it there. And until next time, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katie Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Join us again. Bye. If you love the show, take a moment to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We love to read while you listen, and your rating might help someone else discover the show. Take just a couple of minutes to let the world know what you think of this show. It means the world to us. Thanks.